Hello, hello. How is everyone doing today? Welcome into the Dynasty After Party with myself and, of course, Joel Wirth. I forgot to say my own name there, Michael Sicoli. We're off to a fantastic start here, gentlemen. What is up? How's it going, Joel? How's it going? We're a week away. You can feel it in the air. Football's in the air right now.
Allow myself to introduce myself. Yeah, 1 week away, man. A week away from full Sunday of football. So, like at this time next week, slight foreshadowing, we'll be in the middle of our show talking about the dynasty implications of week one. So, yeah, let's go.
Isn't that exciting? Isn't that exciting when we're going to have
Yeah.
actual data to be talking about? And it's not just wondering, oh, were we right? It's also what happens next. And that's the great thing about Dynasty of we get some data to look at and we realize whether they're buys, they're sells, and then whether or not they are going to be continuing. And the players that we think are going to be continuing those trends, we're talking about those guys exactly on today's show because we're doing flag plants today, Joel. We're talking about the players that we do not want to leave our drafts without, the ones that we refuse to not have, and the ones that we project to be great this season. So we're going to be running through our quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end picks for each one. But first, a few pieces of news, and I'll let you kick it off because we are just in the weeds already because we do this every single week. Jonathan Taylor did not get traded like I thought. You thought he would stay. I thought he'd be a Dolphin. Instead, he is a Colt sitting on the PUP list at least for the next 4 weeks and ruled out. How are you changing your approach to Jonathan Taylor for the 2023 season?
Yeah, this is kind of the nuclear option, right? This is the worst case scenario for all involved. He's just not going to get to play. Yeah, this sucks. There's nothing good about this. So yeah, and the problem is here is right. There's no trade that makes sense for anybody right now, right? Because if you're a contender, you're not giving up a first, which is what it's going to take. Because if I'm going to trade first, I'm a contender. I want someone who I know is going to play this year, not going to miss, the first basically third of the regular season, fantasy regular season. So, and if you're someone who, maybe rebuilding and wants to come off Taylor, you're probably not getting that first. So yeah, I mean, there's just, luckily for me, I was surprised when I looked at my rosters. I only have 2 shares of Taylor. So this isn't a disaster for me, but yeah, just for everyone who has him, this is just a mess.
Yeah, I only have a few as well, and it is a total mess because the news that came out, and I do want to get your take on this. You bet. I hope that you knew I was going to ask you about this, but the 2 teams interested, Miami Dolphins was one. There was a surprise contender for the other, and it was your Green Bay Packers, in the mix for Jonathan Taylor in trade. Now, you're not a representative of the team per se, but you are the number one fan according to most statted out fan bases. So why and why did the Packers throw themselves in the mix for Jonathan Taylor?
So, I mean, just to clarify, there was a report like right after the news kind of leaked that this never got to the GM level, right? This was just kind of functionary underlings, discussing this potential deal. It never got to the level of like Gutekunst and Ballard. So I don't think it was ever that serious. Probably due diligence more than anything. They liked him coming out of college, but that was the year they took Jordan Love, so wasn't gonna be an option. So I think that was more than anything just like I said, due diligence on a player that they liked, on a prospect that they liked and who has shown well. So, and there's a possibility that neither Jones or Dillon are with the team next year, right? Dillon's at the end of his rookie contract. Jones is pushing 30 and expensive. So it's possible that neither are on the roster next year, and Taylor could be a stopgap.
There's a world that Jonathan Taylor trade, if the Packers do get to that point this season, would send A.J. Dillon back this way, and then you see Aaron Jones be a cap casualty in the offseason, and all of a sudden it's Jonathan Taylor's running back room, which wherever he is, it will most likely be that way. But not all good news this week. We obviously start off with a big bomb of the Jonathan Taylor situation, but Cooper Kupp, man, this is the worst news of the week because he had a setback with his hamstring injury that he was dealing with this offseason. He's getting it checked out by a specialist. He's now unlikely to play in week 1, according to the most recent reports I've seen. And for a team that is most likely not close to contending, and they seem to know it, don't really expect to see Cooper Kupp back at least until the week 2-3 mark, and that might be optimistic because he's cashing his check either way, and this team is a mess. So Cooper Kupp, what are you looking at in Dynasty? Because I have a few thoughts, but I know you do too.
I put out some offers this week. Basically, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. On contending teams, obviously. Yeah, this sucks. What happens to this offense, right? Is just as bad as it was last year, except you got Stafford instead of Baker Mayfield? Scary. This could be really bad for like Cam Akers. I mean, this could be a bad offense. So hopefully it's not too serious. The fact that he's going to see a specialist in Minnesota doesn't probably bode well. But yeah, pretty scary.
And the wording of it also was a little bit scary, of the trying to find the root of the problem because it's something he's dealt with in the past. And that just feels, anytime you hear something that is a synonym for the word chronic, is terrifying, especially in a 30-year-old receiver with a soft tissue injury like a hamstring. So a lot of people picking up Van Jefferson on the wires. I won't lie. I picked him up over Josh Dobbs because that's the case of one of my teams. And is there any, obviously Puka Nacua has been a dynasty, or Nakua, if I mispronounced it there, is one of the biggest dynasty darlings of the draft kit community. So are you interested in any of those next names up? Or is Tyler Higbee maybe the name to watch?
Yeah, Higbee is probably the only passing game weapon I would be interested in. We kind of hit up Van Jefferson on the show Thursday night. He's had like opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to kind of be the guy, and he's never done anything with it. So yeah, I have zero faith in him. Nacua is a rookie and a deep one at that. Like him as a kind of deep prospect, but no one I want to count on. I refuse to do anything with Tutu Atwell. I refuse to roster him. So
understandable.
Yeah, there's outside of Higbee. I mean, maybe Higbee just becomes a target monster. I don't know.
Listen,
he was last year.
We've seen him step up in weird stints, and once you get to that weird point of drafts where, man, we don't want anyone, why not? Take a look at your random dart throw in murky situations, because we talked about a lot on this show about murky situations being the biggest finds of where you can find value in Dynasty and fantasy football in general as well. Question in the chat there from Colic, who I believe I know who that is. Dynasty question here: which side do you like better for 2024 and on? Team 1 gives up JSN, Breece Hall, Jameson Williams, and Team 2 gives up Christian Watson, Bijan Robinson in early second. My heart says the JSN side, and I will stick to my heart. But you, oh man, that is difficult. Joel, I know you're looking at that Christian Watson eye there, and I'm sure that's what you're looking at.
So I'm just going to break this down as I do not want Jameson Williams at all. I don't want anything to do with him. So I would take the early second over him. I would take Watson and JSN are probably a push, and I would rather have Bijan than Breece. So I'm going to take side 2.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So we're both on the same page, which is always nice. James Williams, we've talked about it at length on this show about how nervous we are for him, and not just 2023, but also his future, because with each year that passes becomes 1 year less that they believe in him, and 1 year closer to that 5th-year option decision. And the team's well set to make a splash at wide receiver 2 this offseason if James Williams does not show anything this year, because they do need to add someone on the outside.
There's a world where James Williams is just MVS with better draft capital.
Yeah, that world exists for sure. And MVS has been around, but I mean, the man's played with Aaron Rodgers.
Never been good.
Mahomes has never been what we build him up to possibly be, or what some people build him up to be. Next headline here: Josh Palmer to play over Quentin Johnston. Now, don't want to spend too much time on this really, because who cares? We got the heat of the show, the meat of the show coming up, and that's really what we want to talk about. But any surprises here with Quentin Johnston taking a backseat to Palmer?
No. Shout out to our friend Austin Amendolia, who has been completely out on Quentin Johnson the entire time. Yeah. I've been pretty heavily out. I don't think I have any Quentin Johnston shares at all. So I'm not surprised by this. I don't think he was ready to play this year. So yeah, Palmer knows he's got familiarity with Herbert. So not surprised by this at all.
Yep, doesn't surprise me either. Romeo Doubs could be missing, Romeo Doubs could be missing week 1. We'll see. We'll see if this is actually going to happen. But either way, that sets out Christian Watson and a certain rookie that this show is a big fan of, Jayden Reed, to possibly be a week 1 starter, although he could have been regardless of this injury. But this is the exact type of situation that I like picking up guys like Jayden Reed at the end of my drafts, because he could show me something week 1. And if he takes this role and runs with it, they're not taking him off the field because they want him to take that role. They don't want the day 3 guy to be it. They want their day 2 guy to do it. So I'm excited for what Jayden Reed could be doing if Romeo Doubs misses extended time beyond 1 week. But either way, something that I definitely want to note just because of the big dynasty ramifications of this somewhat unknown wide receiver room.
Yeah, they've been really kind of surprisingly tight-lipped about this, hamstring injury.
Oh, yeah.
They've called it kind of precautionary, but we're still, more than a week out of their last preseason game when he mysteriously sat, and he still isn't practicing. So definitely concerning. And you remember back to the draft when they took Jayden Reed at 50 overall, they, Gutekunst made mention that it was because they thought he could play outside. He wasn't, going to be limited to just the slot. So, he could be kind of forced into action outside. They do have also a guy who's shown up or kind of showed out in the preseason, Malik Heath, who was an undrafted out of Mississippi, was actually their number 1 receiver ahead of Jonathan Mingo. Didn't test well, but pretty good route runner, might have a shot. So he started the preseason game that Doubs missed. So he may be, someone who's sitting on your waiver wire that you might be able to get a start out of.
And that
against a terrible Chicago Bears secondary.
That's what dynasty shows are for. Be bringing up the names that nobody wants to talk about except for us. Malik Heath, that's what we're talking about here. Mike Evans, big veteran boy, contract deadline. He issued himself with his agent saying that he is either going to be extended or this is probably going to be his last year on the team by the start of week 1. We, as well as, I'm sure I'm speaking for Joel here, as well as the entire fantasy football community, was somewhat surprised when we saw this report, because why would the Bucs pay you, Mike Evans? Despite it would be loyalty. That's the only reason it would be paying a club legend. But I really doubt that Mike Evans gets his extension here. Seems to be a big trade talk guy. Someone I've been thinking about as a trade talk guy months ago, because that just makes sense where the Bucs are at. But Mike Evans, what are the odds he gets traded? Give me a percent chance.
I think he's going to be one of the more likely guys to get traded at the deadline if it happens. I mean, let's be honest here. They're in the NFC South. I mean, they could be like, 500 at the deadline and be leading that division. So it depends on how they are. It depends on where they're sitting. If they think there's a chance they could win the division and make the playoffs, I could see him not being traded. If they're kind of out of it and they're the disaster we kind of expect with Baker Mayfield, then I wouldn't be surprised if he's traded at all.
Disaster and Baker Mayfield, always fun to talk about. Jeff Wilson targeting a week 5 return. This was a bit of a saga in itself of, oh my goodness, the month it's been for Raheem Mostert. Oh my God, Dalvin Cook's going to come. Nope, he signs with the Jets. Oh my goodness, they're going to trade for Jonathan Taylor. Doesn't happen, at least not for now, not for the next 4 weeks. That concerns starting time on Miami. And now Jeff Wilson is now sidelined on the PUP for at least the next 4 weeks, or the first 4 games, and seems to be that will be the end of it. He'll be back in week 5. At least that's the hope. But Raheem Mostert and Chris Brooks, the undrafted running back, are the only 2 running backs right now on Miami's roster that is not listed on the injury report. You have Etienne that should be healthy, and you have Salvon Ahmed that's dealing with some small injury that I don't expect to sideline him for week 1. But Raheem Mostert, going to the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th round in a lot of drafts, is projected to be the starting running back for a good offense.
If you're a 0 RB guy like me and you ended up with Raheem Mostert, you just bought yourself at least probably 5 starts. So And, I would expect him to get 55, 60% of the carries. So yeah, he's a buy right now.
Oh yeah.
You need someone to plug into your running back room. Go get it.
Now, at the same time, this seems like a perfect sell window for those rebuilding rosters that still have him around.
Oh yeah, for sure.
This is like maybe you wait a week or so, but this is as good as it's going to get for him. And the point that we brought up on the show a few weeks ago that directly connects to the Cooper Kupp news we talked about is players that are right there on that age gap, on that age cusp of all of a sudden we don't want them in Dynasty, or they already are on that hump, but they're that good. When they get injured, that's game over for their value. Cooper Kupp right now, that's why you're trying to buy low, because the price is in the toilet. Like, are you sending like seconds, I'm guessing?
Contender first.
Okay.
Getting something back on the backside, like a third or something like that.
So that's the max right there. But a week ago would have been a first plus for Cooper Kupp.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So and now the same situation could arise here with Mostert. If Mostert misses time, you can't trade him. It's all over. But right now we have a much more glossy road. You can probably get a low end, a high third you could probably get from right now. Maybe more. Maybe you try to hold out and get a little bit more, but you can easily get a third. Next week he'd be worth nothing. So that's the risk you run with those guys on that age gap with that injury risk.
Yeah, if you're a rebuilder and you have Mostert, like don't wait too long. Don't try to go too high. If you can get a late second, early third, or any, if you can move him at all, just move him. You get those points off your team, right? If you're someone who legitimately is not contending and you're trying to, move down to draft in the draft pick area, get those points off your team. Just move him. Get that third. Take the third and go.
Yeah, and to an extent that applies to contenders as well. We project him to be good, but this is as high as value gets. And if you could afford to give up that depth, jump on it. And Kendre Miller. So on top of hamstrings this week, I am sick and tired of the soft tissue parts of our body, of what they're doing to our guys Cooper Kupp and what they're doing to my guy Kendre Miller, because he is sidelined yet again with a hamstring injury. Joel, I haven't even heard anything new about the severity of this or anything to worry about. Should I stop drafting him at the end of my at the end of my drafts? Am I giving up?
For redraft, I think you have to, right?
I don't want to though, Joel. I don't. Talk me out of it.
When we talked about the Saints, I said I was all in on Jamal Williams because I thought there was going to be a window where he was going to be the unquestioned starter, and that window is here, right? There's no way Miller is starting over him during the Kamara suspension. So, like I said, he's got free run. He's got a takeoff lane to himself to just take that job. So yeah, in redraft, I don't want Kendre Miller at all. Dynasty, I mean, he's really concerned right now, right? Because if he does nothing this year, he's going to have zero value in the offseason. So you almost need to bump him down. As much as I like him as a prospect, you almost need to bump him down to the bottom of the second if you're doing a rookie draft.
Yeah,
and there are some rookie drafts going on somehow.
It's difficult. Yeah, the rookie draft thing is at least I don't even know if it's a silver lining because we've paid up for him, but Kendre Miller dealing with that hamstring injury. We'll see how long he's sidelined, but this has been the longest I think we've run on our news segment. So that's because football's back, man. Let's happy. Good problems to have. We're going to be jumping to our flag plants. And before we do that, I want to make sure that you guys are following everyone here that you should be. So at Club Fancy FFL on all social medias, be sure to be checking that out because that's where this content gets streamed to. It's where all the other shows, the billions and billions out there that Club Fancy puts on, it all gets streamed as well. So be sure to be following it at Club Fancy FFL, and obviously Joel here at the Joel Wirth, myself if you want to at Michael__Sicoli. And we also just wrapped up Women of Fantasy Football Month, where thousands and thousands of dollars were raised for a scholarship for women in sports, and amazing to be a part of and watching that doing. So special shout out to everyone involved in that, and just amazing. But
yeah, shout out to everyone involved who donated, shared, any way you helped out whatsoever. Special shout out to Josh Hudson, who does so much. Faith, Kelly, awesome job as usual. But yeah, I mean, Josh puts everything together, all the jerseys, all the raffles, awesome work by him.
Very handsome man. We love to see it. But let's I'm going to make sure I stop that so it doesn't loop like I've done in the past. All right. Flag plant quarterback picks. Now, quarterback is a tricky position, not just in the NFL, but also in fantasy, because unless you're talking super flex, they tend to get forgotten a little bit. Now, with Joel and I, we're often talking super flex, so we're not going to forget them for you. And we have two different names to be talking about here. Joel, kick us off, please. Please kick us off with your flag plant quarterback that you don't want to be without.
So one thing real quick before why flag plants are important in Dynasty, right? So, and this is something that I think kind of rookie Dynasty managers don't differentiate between Dynasty and Redraft. Is if you think of the typical 12-team Dynasty league makeup, right? You've probably got, at least one fish, say, and I don't use that term pejoratively, but someone who's maybe new to Dynasty and doesn't really understand the landscape. And you've probably got 2 to 3 teams that basically are rebuilding or tanking or productive struggling, whatever you want to call it. So anywhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of your league probably is not trying to build the best roster possible. And this is where you need to differentiate Dynasty and Redraft, because the talent distribution, the scoring distribution is completely skewed to the top, say, 8 or 9 teams. So, and it's not, so this is opposite of Redraft, where pretty much everyone coming out of the draft should have a fairly equal level of talent. This is very different. You're basically playing against 7 or 8 other competitors for the championship if you're a contender. So in an 8-team league, you need to differentiate yourself somehow. You need to have those guys who come out of nowhere to make an impact. The impact starters who were bench guys in the draft, the guys who go from starter to superstar, next year's first rounder, that the golden goose of the fantasy industry, right? Everybody's looking for next year's first rounder. So this is why these are important, because you've got to find a way to differentiate, process and being player agnostic. That's a great way to build your team long term. But if you want to win, you've got to hit on some of these flag plants. So this is where we're going to start off. So this is where we're going this year. I'm going to start with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback. And if you think about where he is now, and you compare that to where Jalen Hurts was last year, they're in a very similar spot, right? Players that quarterbacks and superflex that people kind of knew had the upside, but were just kind of terrified to invest in long term because of whatever reason. With Tua was, or with Jalen Hurts, it was, is he a good quarterback? Is he going to hold the job for more than this year? With Tua, it's obviously the injuries and the concussion specifically. So we saw last year when he was healthy, he was a top 5 quarterback. He was putting up top 5 numbers. He's got as good a receiver core as there is in the league. He's got one of the more exciting offensive head coaches in the league. So this is a guy who, if he can stay healthy, and, that's a big if, but if he can do it, can give you top 5 quarterback production at, where's it going? QB 14, QB 15 price?
Maybe later.
Yeah.
I love that pick. And the 2 names I was talking with between was, one of them is obviously the guy I'm going to be talking about in a bit, but the other one was Tua, because I'm such a big fan of his game. I think he's a good quarterback. Every advanced analytic massively supports how accurate and decisive that he is. The deep accuracy is among the best in the league, if not the best in the league, despite the public narrative about his arm. So love Tua, and I love that comparison to Jalen Hurts, because you have Jalen Waddle and you have Tyreek Hill, you had AJ Brown, and you have you obviously have Devonta Smith. Now, different circumstances and all that, but they're guys that get put on discount just because of this is an injury history, and it's concussions at that. They're incredibly fluky about when they happen. And you want to know what? Guarantee you he's been learning how to protect himself this offseason. Yep. Guarantee you on my life he has taken some lessons on how to protect his head when falling. So unless somebody, Myles Garrett's him to the head, hopefully he can avoid a big hit on a sack. So yeah, love that pick with Tua as well. So love to see it. Otherwise, the other name I love to see on my rosters, that's Geno Smith. So let's recap a bit. Let me set the scene, put the tablecloth out, light the candles. A year ago, nobody wanted Geno Smith, myself included. I did not believe that we were going to see a random 10-year resurgence or whatever length of time it actually was with what looked like a pretty bad team. And then kind of like Jalen Hurts and kind of like Tua, those receivers and that help he has around him and the good throws that he made him a very good fantasy quarterback. He's a top 6 fantasy quarterback. And why are we fading him down at the QB 16, 17 range right now? Why are we talking about him as a mid to low end QB2? He got an extension. That's good, despite it being despite it being technically a 1-year deal if they wanted to be. It's still money. They didn't have to give it. Could have drafted somebody. Could have done something else. They had a lot of picks from the Russell Wilson deal. Instead, they keep him firmly the starter. They add JSN in the first round. It's nice to have a near generational type of prospect at wide receiver added when your last year wide receiver 3 was what? Dwayne Eskridge? Not really interested. The tight end room is the same. You get a second year in the system with, or you get a second or third year now with Noah Fant sitting back there. You add Zach Charbonnet to this running back room. Potent running game. Never hurts to have that with your star quarterback. Check out Jalen Hurts with Miles Sanders getting 14 touchdowns last year. Didn't affect Jalen Hurts' value too much. Now, why are we valuing Geno Smith lower? When his entire team around him has gotten better, he's been added with a great wide receiver, and he proved it last year that he is a dang good quarterback. What, are we just randomly chalking up as a fluke? Like, to me, there's no basis for this. There's no basis for him to go outside the top 12. Sure, he doesn't have the rushing upside, and no, he won't be the QB1 overall, but he could very easily be this year's, a Kirk Cousins type of guy, the guy that will finish inside the top 8, inside the top 10 very consistently, who faces, the 49ers are tough to face twice a year, but you still get the Cardinals and you still get, my goodness, help me out with the other team, the NFC West, the Rams, who are our total ghost of their old selves, especially on defense. I love Geno Smith this year. And whenever I miss out on my quarterback, I just wait. Because I could get Tua later. I can get Geno later. I can get Daniel Jones later. Like, these are guys that nobody wants, and this is Dynasty. Geno Smith, despite being old, is so undervalued in Dynasty, and I don't understand it. That's why I chose him as my flag plant, because he is a great value right now.
Yeah, and you hit on the point that they signed him to an extension, right? It wasn't long-term, but still, like, what are they going to do next year? If you're afraid of that this is a short-term, he's not a short-term thing, right? Because he's got at least a 2-year window, because they're not going to be bad enough to be in contention for elite quarterback in the draft. There's no way. They're too talented, barring just a massive injury outbreak or something. So yeah, where else are they going to go for a quarterback? So I think this is Geno's room for 2 years at least.
Yeah, I'm so here for it. And yeah, the point you raised about them also being a good team and not being able to invest in a Caleb Wilson and Drake May potentially, you have to factor that in. And Geno would have to be really bad for them to replace him. This is still a pretty team-friendly deal by quarterback standards, especially when we're going to be factoring the contracts that Burrow is going to get and whoever the breakout quarterback this year. Let's say Tua does have a huge breakout. He gets extended. Geno is going to be looking very affordable this time next year for sure. So another incentive for why the Seahawks want to keep him. Now, Joel, running backs. The tough position of Dynasty Fantasy Football to plant your flag on, because he might be a flag plant this year. He might be a 1,000% fade next year. So who are you planting your zero RB flag on?
So I'm not going zero RB on this one, but I'm going to say Travis Etienne, because I think the market has moved way too far south on him. Bigsby looks good in preseason, but he hasn't shown anything. He wasn't an elite prospect. Let's slow our roll on a guy that this time last year was everybody's darling, right? Everybody wanted Travis Etienne. He was the sweetheart of the draft. Everyone was on him. got off to a slow start, right? He was having to share carries with James Robinson, kind of struggled early and then took off. And then, before the draft, everybody loved him. And then they took Tank Bigsby, and then there was some nervousness. And then it became the preseason, and it became even more nervousness. It's preseason football, people. Let's slow our Tank Bigsby roll. I think Travis Etienne is going to have as much, if not more, snaps, carries, opportunities as he had last year. So I think he'll get more work in the passing game. I don't think he's a zero there. I'm going to go Travis Etienne.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems in fantasy football, I think, is us spending the summer overthinking ourselves. And I feel like that's exactly what we've done with Travis Etienne Tank Bigsby's had apparently a pretty strong summer. I didn't love him as a prospect, but that aside, there's no one in that backfield. That's why they added him, is because they had to use JaMycal Hasty way too much last year, which is on the field. And that is too much for JaMycal Hasty to be on the field. And adding Tank Bigsby is an indictment of that backup running back room, not of Travis Etienne. And sure, I completely agree, because Bigsby could take some, but if we're expecting Jacksonville to make the leap that we are hoping they do, there should be more than enough room for its lead 70%, 65% even running back that is a much better pass catcher than Tank Bigsby as well, in my personal opinion. But my flag pant running back, anybody that's been tuning into this show, is not going to be surprised. Anybody that has followed my Twitter is not going to be surprised. J.K. Dobbins. Mr. Joel, it's finally going to happen. It's happening here. We have the contract year set up. We have the 2 years removed from injury set up. It's right on the wall, and if I wasn't a damn Steeler fan, his jersey would be hanging up right there, because J.K. Dobbins was my favorite running back in his class. And while Jonathan Taylor, oh, look, he's amazing. Guess who's playing week 1 this year? That's J.K. Dobbins, all right? And my joking aside, J.K. Dobbins has been nothing short of sensational every time he's on the field. He top 5 in breakaway run rates in his rookie year in 2020. He was number 4 or number 3 this past season, despite the injury. And then we had the injury where he missed the entire year because he didn't end up playing. So we know that he has that burst. We knew he had it even a year after a very serious injury. And now we have him 2 years removed from that, the lone back of this backfield. Of all the things we haven't talked about enough in this offseason, it's about how the Ravens have really not added anything to the running back room. They added Melvin Gordon 2 months ago, and then added him to the practice squad last week. They have Gus Edwards, who has not looked anything like his self when he kind of looked good a few years ago. You have Keaton Mitchell, an undrafted rookie, or maybe he was 7th round. I might be forgetting. I think he was an undrafted rookie. Yep. Big whoop. And that's it. That's the room, really. You have Justice Hill, who's apparently done all right, but who cares? It's Justice Hill. These guys have had plenty of opportunities to shine in Justice Hill, that is, and he hasn't. So I think Dobbins is going to make a huge step forward with the Ravens in general. And if we think, Baltimore is going to be scoring more with this Todd Monken offense, with Odell and Zay Flowers and a hopefully healthy Rashad Bateman, the running back is going to be getting his. And we've seen Mark Ingram get double-digit touchdowns. Why not J.K. Dobbins with a touch of burst on the side? So very excited for J.K. Dobbins this year. I could talk all day, but I'll cut myself off now.
Yeah, a couple things on Dobbins. He has shown basically everything you want. He hasn't really shown the big pass catching ability, but sure, in an offense with Lamar Jackson, I wouldn't expect him to get a lot of that anyway. So, if your ceiling is Nick Chubb, that's not such a bad thing. He's shown the ability to be an elite touchdown scorer. He's shown the ability to be an elite breakaway back. Like you said, we brought up multiple times, he averaged 7 yards a carry once he came back off the injury list, or off IR last year for the last 6-7 games. And you hit it. There's nothing behind him. Like, people are picking up Justice Hill off of waivers for some reason. Why? This guy's never done any. Cool. Good luck to that. Points. Yeah, you're going to be cutting him after week 1. I guarantee it. So you may as well just leave that roster spot open. So yeah, there's nothing there. Gus Edwards has was never good and has been worse since his ACLs. I think, we've talked about this before. I think this offense is going substantially the same. Maybe just run a little bit faster. I don't like any of these receivers other than Mark Andrews and maybe Isaiah Likely. You're telling me that Beckham is going to come back at age 30 after 2 ACLs and be an impact player. You're telling me Rashad Bateman's going to be an impact player after doing nothing for 2 years and coming off a Liz Frank injury. Zay Flowers is a Smurf. Dobbins is after Andrews, he's the best weapon. And I suppose you've got to include Lamar Jackson, but he's the best weapon on this offense other than those two.
And
those are pretty elite weapons.
That's really the crux of it, of maybe the Odell experiment works out, the Zay Flowers, maybe that works out, and great, because then Dobbins could profit with quicker drives and goal line punching with a more efficient offense. Or it doesn't work. And then they just go back to the run game that they normally have, which was number 1 in the league in rushing attempts last year. So if they want to drop, you could drop 5 carries, and how much they ran it last year, they'll still be a top 5 run unit in terms of attempts. So I love what J.K. Dobbins will be doing this year, and I really think his floor is so high compared to an RB22, RB20 price. I just drafted him again 20 minutes ago because I can't stop myself. It's just too good of a value. But listen, he might not be catching a lot of balls, although there was a report last week that J.K. Dobbins is getting more work with the pass catchers. A very traditional summer report. But people that will be catching balls are wide receivers, and one of them is on our thumbnail today, Joel. And I know you feel a special place in your heart for this guy. Talk me through your flag plant wide receiver pick.
Yeah, no surprise. It's Christian Watson. Shocking, I know. Outside of his mom, who's pretty active on Twitter, I think I may be the biggest Christian Watson fan on the planet. There's a lot to like here. And, we kind of mentioned earlier, we're all looking for next year's, first round pick, top 10 at their position, whatever. I think next year, Christian Watson's going to be a top 10 dynasty receiver.
Clip it.
Go ahead. We've seen in the preseason is what it is, but we've seen defenses roll coverage to Christian Watson. They respect him as a threat. We need to listen to what the NFL tells us, right? They are afraid of him on this offense. The Patriots rolled coverage to him. The Bengals rolled coverage to him. They put a safety over the top basically everywhere he went, and he's still producing. So I've talked about him ad nauseum. Here's the one thing I haven't mentioned. The Packers have by far the easiest passing schedule of defenses against the pass in the league. And if you think about who they're playing, they got their division is the Bears, the Lions, the Vikings, twice each, all terrible pass defenses. The NFC South, there's not a good pass defense in there. The AFC West, Chiefs are okay. Denver's pretty good. Chargers are terrible. Raiders are god awful. They played the Rams without Jalen Ramsey. Their defense is going to be a mess. The Falcons, who, they've made some free agent acquisitions. How soon are they going to gel together? They played the Falcons week 2.
A lot more talent on the defensive line than the secondary as well.
Yeah. So this is obviously these things change during, it may not be number 1 overall, but which of these pass defenses made huge improvements? Maybe Detroit did a little bit, but this is a really soft pass defense schedule. So I think there's a runway for this to be an elite player.
Yeah, and we love runways here because they start something good. You start and you fly up, and that's kind of what Christian Watson does through the air. But what another receiver, this time wearing a different shade of green, catching passes from Christian Watson's old buddy last year, and maybe not buddy based on how angry this Aaron Rodgers guy got at him last year. But Aaron Rodgers has a sweet spot for Garrett Wilson, my flag plant wide receiver, and obviously someone that I recognize what I'm picking here. I'm picking someone that is going off the board as a top 12 wide receiver, a borderline first round pick, early second, if not in the first round. I recognize that I'm picking a top caliber player here. And that's why, just like when I wrote my article on Garrett Wilson for our Look Inside series, which you can check out at clubfantasyffl.com and check out my article on that for a deeper look into Garrett Wilson, it's why I said I think he's going to be a top 5 wide receiver this year. It's why I think he's already in my top 5 dynasty wide receivers this year, and he doesn't go at that price. So you're getting him at that wide receiver 7, 8 range right now. And I am so in on what Garrett Wilson can do with a capable quarterback. I don't need Rodgers to be the MVP. All I need him to do is to be better than what Garrett Wilson had last year in Zach Wilson. 92nd in catchable target, Rachel. 92nd. Do you know how many players that is?
That's Kyle Pitts bad.
That's like, that might be worse than Kyle Pitts. 92nd in catchable target rate, 6th in unrealized air yards, just had 4 touchdowns on the season. All 3 of those metrics have to go up substantially. 6 in unrealized air yards means that there is so many yards left on the table because those catchable targets were not very catchable. And we know those targets aren't going to dip. We even saw a little taste of it in the preseason game. 3 catches, 30 yards, 1 touchdown, because Garrett Wilson was the focal point of this offense. And if you have any further doubts, Allen Lazard's dealing with an injury. Mecole Hardman has massively disappointed, as we all expected, except for the Jets, I guess. And we have one man there to catch the ball, one man with enough talent to be worthy of Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson type of love. And that's Garrett Wilson, who's going to be a true breakout star receiver for fantasy football this year. And his ceiling is only determined by how many touchdowns he scores, because you know the receptions are going to be there. The yardage is going to be there. If he scores 6, maybe he finishes at his draft position. If he scores 10, he's finishing inside that top 3. And I love that type of play.
I'm ready to take a small L on Garrett Wilson.
Yay!
So earlier in the offseason, I was fading him because I thought he was priced at his ceiling, maybe a little bit over his ceiling. It looks like, from all indications, that he is going to be the next Devontae Adams for Aaron Rodgers. Like, he is just going to be targeted relentlessly. I expect like 165, 170 target season, just because the rest of the receiving core is so bad. They're starting Randall Cobb at slot. Jesus God, that guy should have been out of the league years. I'm super great guy. Love him. But yeah, he should have been out of the league for 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever.
$13,000 for a blindside block. That's his contribution to New York right now.
Yeah. Starting Allen Lazard, who's already hurt. There's just nothing else there. Exactly. There's nothing else there. Mecole Hardman is a gadget player at best. Who else is Rodgers going to throw to? And we know that he likes to lock on to one target, and almost to a fault. Basically to a fault, right? It cost him. So we've all seen the pictures of the last play in the 49ers playoff game where he threw into triple coverage to Devontae Adams instead of a wide open Allen Lazard and a wide open Equanimeous St. Brown. So yeah, I believe there's a massive target season in play for Garrett Wilson.
You know, there's no sound sweeter than hearing someone say, you know what, I've come around on a player that you like. And listen, it's not victory lapping because it hasn't happened yet. All right. All I've done is maybe help convince you to be maybe wrong, because it has to happen still.
Yep.
But
all that matters in Dynasty is value, right? So it doesn't matter if he produces or not right now. You know, if you're trading him for value or you're giving him away for the wrong value, then that's what matters.
I am trying so hard to get him in some leagues right now. I am offering packages with Devontae Adams and a lot more on it for Garrett Wilson. And right now it's not even being entertained. And that, everyone, is the pain of being a New Yorker, because you got Jet fans that own Garrett Wilson and will never, ever give them up to someone like me. And to East Campus.
Real quick, that's what flag plants are all about, right? These are the guys that we're willing to pay at the top of the market for. Yeah, I don't want to overpay, but I'm willing to buy high on these guys.
Yeah, and I will not stop trying to get Garrett Wilson. Hopefully he's on my roster by the time of next show, which you guys can check out for. And Scampers, no, don't you worry. If Mecole Hardman cuts into Garrett Wilson's vibe, I'll stop doing fantasy football, just in general, because I am that
zero concerned about that.
Zero concerned about that. Thankfully, God. But tight end, man, I know that just like me, pulling out the big, deep, diving rock guns of Garrett Wilson from the depths of people's ADPs, I know that you surely have a similar picture.
Yeah, mine is Travis Kelce. And before you say no shit, Sherlock, this is a dynasty take, right? This is a guy that I'm willing to pay. Like we said, I'm willing to pay top of the market price. If I'm a contender, if I'm even middling contender, fringe playoff team, I'm willing to pay what it takes to get him on my team because he's an automatic ticket to the playoffs. And he is, once you get to the playoffs, assuming that Jerick McKinnon doesn't take all his touchdowns like he did last year, he's a guy who can get you through the playoffs. So I will pay basically whatever, assuming I don't already have an Andrews or something like that. If I'm a contender who needs a tight end or, has someone basically Hawkinson on down, I'm still trying to move up to get Travis Kelce.
And I made fun of the pick initially, but I do genuinely appreciate picking him as your flag plant because people are terrified to draft him in startups right now. Nobody wants to pick a 33-year-old. He's 33, correct me, right?
Yeah.
So nobody wants to draft a 33-year-old in your first 3 rounds, second round even, of your dynasty startup. But giving people the confidence to do that, and I think justifiably so, given the durability of the tight end position for fantasy, I think I salute you, sir, because I'm going to take a braver path here, but not one I feel nearly as confident about, despite it being my flag plant. Listen, I'm in. All right, I'm in. This is my flag plant. I'm ready to be wrong. This is what I'm saying. I'm not being wishy-washy. But this is tight end, and I'm diving outside the top 10 here, which means I'm switching out of this lovely shirt and putting on a pair of overalls to go dumpster diving. So I'm talking about Greg Dulcich. Greg Dulcich. Now, in a similar sense of Geno Smith, what changed with Greg Dulcich to be the, oh my God, he's the next breakout guy that he was in December? Right, December, January, everybody wanted him. People are sending low ball offers to try to get him on the low, keep him on the end of the bench, wait for the breakout next season or maybe next. And now, months later, where Jerry Jeudy's hurt, you have Marvin Mims now added to this team that doesn't even have Tim Patrick for a second season. Again, probably the end of his days with the Broncos in a meaningful way, at least. You have Sean Payton added in, who is a great offensive mind. You added a inline blocking tight end, Adam Troutman. And yet nobody wants Dulcich. Nothing's changed. Nothing, in my eyes, nothing has changed. If anything, we've knocked Jeudy out already, which sucks. And Jeudy and Treylon Burks, the 2 guys that dealt with some injuries this last month, as well as Terry McLaurin, all guys I would have considered being my flag plants prior to injuries, which is great. Love to see it. But Dulcich, that is, why not Dulcich? He could easily be on the field a lot more in 12 personnel sets. He will be on the field for passing downs. That won't be Adam Troutman. Sean Payton more than anybody knows that Troutman is a blocker and just that, because he wouldn't let Troutman do anything else in New Orleans. That was Juwan Johnson's job. And Juwan Johnson has had some very good games for fantasy. And Dulcich is a better player than Juwan Johnson. That's why he was drafted higher. It's why he looked as good as he did as a rookie last year and made several highlight plays that we were all excited to get for Chigo Okonkwo. And now we are not even, we're totally forgetting about Greg Dulcich. And listen, the numbers, they weren't crazy by any stretch, but he proved he could get downfield last year. He had a 10.6 average depth of target. He was top 5 among tight ends in slot snaps. If Jerry Jeudy's out, you imagine Marvin Mims gets that. But eventually they're going to be mixing in a bigger body than the very tiny Marvin Mims. And that's where Greg Dulcich can really thrive up the middle. So I think if it's not going to be this year, maybe it's next year. But either way, he's someone who is, I think the pendulum has swung way too far on Greg Dulcich. I don't even think we've talked about enough on this show.
So we've agreed way too much on the show. I'm going to disagree on this one.
Yay, good.
And it's not a function of the player, it's the offense. And
that's fair.
I'm completely out on Russell Wilson. He's never been a guy who's been who's aggressively targeted tight ends. And I think we brought up when we talked about Denver, Dulcich was a guy kind of like George Pickens in that he had a lot of highlight plays just wasn't a consistent producer at all, wasn't consistently targeted. The Judy injury certainly opens up a pathway for him to be productive. I'm just really kind of afraid that this offense is just an absolute cluster F. And
that's fair.
What's the opposite of a rising tide floats all boats? A drought
a
sinks
sinking
everything.
Tsunami sinks all boats. I guess I don't know, but yeah. And listen, I'm certainly not betting on Russ Wilson doing a bounce back because I don't love him to do that. But about target share, Dulcich was up at 17% as a rookie at tight end, which to me is an incredibly impressive number to be doing in your rookie year, especially with how bad Denver was last year. You hope that they can't be worse. Truthfully, they can't be worse. They was easily they can't.
Sure about that?
Cannot be worse. They cannot
Sure
be
about
worse.
that?
Monty Williams is back. Jared Judy's not, but I'm sorry. I'll plant my flag on that because that Colts Broncos game will live in my head for all of eternity for being the worst game of football offensively. I loved it. That's why you try IDP, because I love that for Baron Browning. But man, that was bad. This offense will be better if slightly, and I'm hoping that Dulcich will be the guy to take advantage of that, or at least put together a solid, if sporadic, season that really shapes up for a bigger 2024. Because if he puts up good numbers, but it's not great for fantasy, maybe he only scores 2 touchdowns or something because Denver is that bad, your concerns about the offense, this is the time to buy him, because then we're going to be talking touchdown regression in the offseason. We're going to be talking about an open target share because maybe Jerry Jeudy gets traded on his 5th-year option because he can't stay healthy again, or Courtland Sutton gets released on his big extension. Tim Patrick will be gone. Russell Wilson's gone. Who knows? All those unknowns in Denver right now. But Greg Dulcich shouldn't really be one, because I think he has shown enough in his rookie season to have a lot of hope for the future, and you can get him for dirt cheap right now. Only rostered in 44% of Yahoo leagues. So, people are done with him. People are done. I don't think we should be quite yet.
My quarterback flag plant should have been like anti-Russell Wilson.
Listen, I can't stand Russell Wilson, so I'm all for the hate for him. But we have seen bad quarterbacks support good receivers at times. We saw it with Russell, with Jerry Jeudy over the back half of the season last year, and especially when Nathaniel Hackett was taken out of the picture, albeit in a very small sample size. We saw some sustained fantasy points from Russell Wilson's weapons out there in Denver, but certainly not something to bank on. But again, I think that's factored into his price. But let's get to I'm jumping the gun here. Let's get to our do better trades. Amazing segment we do every single week about talking about the trades we have going down in our leagues, whether we should be slapping that do better sticker on them. And we're going to start off right here with a big name. That'll be Austin Ekeler for Austin Ekeler and Rashad Bateman for Hollywood Brown in 2024 first in a super flex. Now, I won't lie to you, Joel. I have some vested interest in this one. And I'm not even going to tell you what side I am, because I want to hear your completely unbiased take.
As we just mentioned a few minutes ago, I have no interest in Rashad Bateman at all. So I would take Hollywood over him by quite a bit. And like a 24 first is probably pretty good value for Austin Ekeler. So I can do things with that 24 first that I can't do with Ekeler. So even if I'm a contender, I want the Hollywood Brown and 24 first side.
Interesting. So this is our I believe it's our club fantasy dynasty league, if you're able to piece it together or not. This is an offer I received about 2 weeks ago that I held off on for now because I wasn't exactly sure how my team was going to go. This is a Jonathan Taylor team, so I have a bit of a more clear direction of where my team's going, whether I choose to enjoy that direction or not. And I am the Austin Ekeler side. So this would be the beginning of a bit of a teardown, something I think the roster might need, but was kind of holding out hope. Jonathan Taylor missing 4 games assured certainly is not going to help that. So definitely it's an interesting type of trade because, man, I was flip-flopping on this one back and forth. So happy to get that. But back to
be fair, you took over that team. That was not.
I didn't destroy that team. That is a good point. I did not destroy that team. I'm not going to shout out the person that did. But yeah, it's not in great shape. Very win now, but without the depth to be a win now. 12 teams, Superflex roster starting 9, Anthony Richardson and Adam Thielen for Kenny Pickett and Josh Jacobs. This is a real test of the love for Anthony Richardson right now.
So I wanted to get your temperature on this with being it's a Pickett trade. I gave away this, and this happened before Jacobs came back, but I expected him to come back, so it didn't really do anything. I took the Richardson side. I gave up Pickett and Jacobs. So Thielen's obviously a complete zero in this trade, just a placeholder, basically just a roster spot. But yeah, so this is me banking on the Richardson upside in a start 9 over Pickett and Jacobs. Yeah, your thoughts as the Steeler fan?
I get it, and the Steeler fan of me, and I never let that bleed into my fantasy decisions because, as you know more than anyone, I can't stand anyone I choose to root for. So
I'm a bit of a fatalist.
I'm entirely a fatalist. I'm a pessimist, whatever you want to call with an ist at the end. I could be that. Kenny Pickett has massively impressed me this month, but I wasn't a big believer of his to begin with. And I do think I'm starting to turn my head on that, on whether he could be a capable starter, but whether he's a capable starter and a capable fantasy starter are two entirely different things. So I'm all for shooting for the sky here. Josh Jacobs could be amazing this year, but he's still a contract year running back that is going to be 26 or 27 years old by the time he hits free agency. They're not going to keep him around. I choose to believe that. And cashing in for what we are projecting to be the next Cam Newton type of prospect at quarterback is a lottery ticket I'm more than willing to pay. So I like the Anthony Richardson side quite a lot, as much of a zero as Adam Thielen is to get in that. I'm totally for paying up at this cost. I'm a little bit hesitant of the overall cost of Anthony Richardson, but the contract situation of Josh Jacobs being a 1-year type of situation, I think that really does move the needle for me in a super flex.
Also, Jacobs, 375 touches last year, short camp with the holdout, a bit of an injury risk.
Yeah, definitely. And like any running back in that fashion, especially someone that has been, close to a bell cow, dealt with some injuries in the past over his rookie contract. 12-team, 1 quarterback, starting 8. Kyle Pitts and Darren Waller for Mark Andrews. Triple tight end deal. We haven't seen one of these yet.
So very shallow. It's a start 8. And so I gave up Andrews and got Pitts and Waller just because the other manager had been trying to get Andrews from me for quite a while. It started out as Andrews and a third for Pitts, and there was no chance that was happening. Then it became Andrews and Pitts straight up. I say, I still want Andrews. And then I think it moved to Andrews for Pitts and a third, didn't move the needle at all. And it became Andrews for Pitts and Waller. I feel like that's just as much as I like Andrews this year, and I think he's the clear tight end too, just feels like too much value to pass up, even in a start 8.
Is it? I apologize if you mentioned. Is this premium at all?
No premium.
No premium. Okay, that's tough. Man, I have honestly, I think the highest player share I have this season, despite me not picking him as my flag plant, surprisingly, I guess, is Mark Andrews. I think I have Mark Andrews in probably at least 60-70% of leagues right now, which is scary, but I'm all in. So it's difficult for me. But I like the Kyle Pitts and Darren Waller side. I think you get a perfect blend of future and present with that. You line up Darren Waller. If it takes another year for Kyle Pitts, hopefully not, but you should hopefully have Darren Waller to do that. So, yeah, I like this deal for you quite a lot. So you get my support here on this one. Now, I'm going to choose another trade here that I haven't done yet, and maybe he's listening to this show. But this is the biggest dynasty decision that I've been faced with in a bit. I've won this league, my home dynasty league, in 2 of the last 3 or 4 years. I don't even know how long we're going for now, but it's been a bit. I'm looking at a rebuild. I'm looking at potentially flipping some pieces, getting younger. Would you trade Devontae Adams, Najee Harris, and Gus Edwards, that is, from my side, for Tyjae Spears, Elijah Mitchell, a first in 2024 that will almost definitely, I can lock you in as a top 2 pick. And I know that is something we have talked about on the show about not doing. However, I have some experience with this manager, and I know the roster. It's not great. So top 3 lock, top 2 almost definitely, top number 1 more than likely, and a 2024 second, late second most likely.
Here's my issue with the 24 first in this league, and that it's 1 QB, which devalues the picks. I mean, so then becomes like the 24 class becomes, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brock Bowers.
Marvin Harrison Jr., Brock Bowers, Raheem Sanders, I guess. The other Ohio State receiver. It's a pretty good class on the top right now.
It's a good class. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know that beyond Harrison, is there an elite?
That's really what I'm watching with this, and I'll provide some extra context if that changes anything. And I think this is something that affects listeners as well, because a lot of us make trades based on what we already have as well, and naturally so in that way. I also have another first with another terrible team in the league that more than likely will be a top 3, top 4 type of guy. So in my view, I'm potentially increasing. I'm almost making Marvin Harrison a lock to be on my roster with this deal. And I believe this pick will be Marvin Harrison. However, I recognize how risky it is to be thinking like that.
If that pick is Marvin Harrison, then yes, I'm okay with this deal. If there's more than a handful of risk that it's not, I would want something. Now here's the other thing is if you're kind of bailing out
running backs.
Yeah, I would almost rather trade Devontae and Najee separately. I don't know if I want to trade them all in one package.
Yeah, this deal initially started ironically as me asking for the first for Devontae straight up, and has 100% swelled to things out of my control, and maybe I've lost some vision on that trade. But listen, those were our do better trades. We might even be slapping a sticker on myself there for the offer I almost took, may still take. Who the hell knows? You got to tune in next week to be hearing back on that one. But thank you all for tuning in. This has been an amazing hour of our flag plant picks, the players that we could not go without. You can follow Joel here at the Joel Wirth on Twitter. You can follow myself at Michael__Sicoli. And if you're not following Club Fantasy FFL, why aren't you? ClubFantasyFFL.com, as well as Club Fantasy FFL on Twitter and all the lovely sites there. So yeah, that's our show right there. And I really want to thank you all for sticking through. Any final thoughts, Joel, as we head into our first football Sunday?
Real long 3 days, right? Even though one of them's a day off. Thursday, we get real football, and we get to overreact. Remember last year when the Gabe Davis Truthers, of which I was one, got the victory lap for 1 week?
Week 1 overreactions. There's nothing like it. You know what my favorite example is? Let's do that real quick. We'll reminisce as we end out the show here. Your favorite week 1 overreaction, because I have mine. I can go first if you don't have yours locked in.
Go ahead.
Mike Gillislee. Oh my goodness. Patriots legend. Starts off the first couple of weeks, scores like 3 touchdowns on like 5 carries. Everybody overpays to get him on the wire, and he's not even on the team by like week 4. Oh,
nice.
Good
That's
times,
a good one.
Right?
Yeah, recency bias is going to push me toward the Gabe Davis last year when I was a bit more subdued, but the Gabe Davis Truthers were hard victory lapping after week 1, and then what was it, week 2 that he sprained his ankle, right? And then everything kind of went to hell real quickly. So
the Gabe Davis,
just be careful. Be careful.
It's often a bumpy one, and
it
one
is.
that is filled with many twists and turns. Thank you, Scampers, for joining in our chat as always.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to see
Thanks, everyone, for popping in.
Yes, thank you, everyone, for coming in, dropping in all the amazing questions that we get every single week, and I really do appreciate you guys spending your time with this show, because we know there's a lot out there. So thank you for myself from Club Fantasy, as well as obviously from Joel right over here. And we'll see you guys. We're not exactly sure if we're doing next Sunday, but we're going to get back to you guys. That's why you follow on social media, because we might be doing a different type of showtime, because Sunday we all want to be watching football at 8 p.m. So we're going to be figuring out a perfect time just for you guys. So at a time to be determined later, that is our show. Remember, Dynasty is like a disco ball. It keeps on spinning year round. So join the club every day to be determined and time to be determined Eastern at Club Fantasy. Have a good time. Have a good night. Stay healthy. Stay safe.